Hi, I'm Dr. Olivia Holter. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology here at Central Washington University. So a flipped classroom tends to be defined as a class where students are engaging in that stereotypical lecture material outside of class time. For faculty, what that flipped classroom really means is having those lectures pre-recorded ahead of time and then having a shorter in-person face-to-face time that's typically dedicated to discussion and project-based learning. My expectation is that before class, students will have read and watched the lectures. I typically have my PowerPoints and my materials ready, so that way if students don't get something, we can go back to lectures and re-go through that material. But it allows for a more focused time in class where we're really just discussing topics that students have questions about. In that time, I would guide discussion with questions, and at the same time, really students were driving the discussion. In those small group discussions, it allowed for students that typically don't talk in large groups to talk. They're openly discussing instead of being talked at, and there's a lot more engagement in their learning. When I teach in a flipped manner, students, I think, feel more able to come into class with questions. So they might come in and say, hey, Dr. Holter, I saw this on TikTok. Apparently this is something that we're all talking about. We want to know, based off of literature and psychology, what do you think? It allowed for kind of nuanced learning that I'd never seen before. I got to see students connecting with each other. It's always really fun to kind of see students meet people that they've never met before, have these discussions. Now over campus, I'll walk into the circ and I'll see students from that class interacting with each other and still choosing to talk to each other and have those connections. The big change here is having those pre-recorded lectures and then having a smaller amount of in-person face-to-face time that's dedicated to discussion. So for instructors that are kind of wanting to do this in the future, I think it's really kind of beneficial because then you can kind of prep those lectures ahead of time. So maybe summer break or Christmas break, you can kind of record those lectures, kind of get them ready to go, and then really your kind of prep time, your class time, is a little bit shorter. I know some people and faculty on campus too, they when they're doing flipped classrooms, they'll just record it the week before, but it kind of allows for that flexibility of when you kind of do those recordings. I did a little bit of both. I did some prep ahead during breaks, and then I also did some prep during other times too, and especially if there was an event that I wanted to make sure that got into those lectures. I also think, the Panopto software that has been offered to faculty is fantastic because then you can kind of re-edit some of those videos and add things in. If you make mistakes, you can kind of edit them out. They're using that time for more of that discussion-based learning. When I got my SEOIs back from this last quarter, they were positive. The majority of students really talked about how they liked it. It gave them a lot of flexibility in their learning. So they weren't coming every day to a lecture. When they did come to class, they weren't just kind of sitting back and passively learning. They were really engaging in the topics.